What is Intercoin? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Intercoin is basically solutions for communities that leverage the security of the crypto ecosystem and blockchain. So essentially, if you run a community and you store information in a database, then it's not secure. For example, if you have an election, somebody can go in and change the votes. If you have your currency balances in a database, somebody could go in and change the balance. It changes the entire expectation of the community when someone with the right access can access anything. With a blockchain, as we know, anybody can only access what they're entitled to. In this case, their own balances or their own vote. They can check that their vote was counted. They can check that their balance is under their control and send it to someone else. So it turns out that this kind of blockchain technology is very useful for a lot of things, not just peer-to-peer payments. So Intercoin was started as a way to essentially let communities deploy their own sort of community wallet and allow that to happen. So for example, if you have the Trust app, it's a wallet and you can hold different tokens in it with Ethereum. But that's pretty much all you can do. You can hold tokens, you can send tokens. And when you send them, you might have address book of people. But if we look at social networks and things that people use every day, right, these things are used to actually talk to people. And as a result, not only do they talk to people, but they can also do things like send money to each other. So that's essentially the mainstream use of technology. Bitcoin is not being used today as a medium of exchange. Ethereum is not being used as a medium of exchange. Instead, they're being used to invest and speculate on different assets. And the reason is because they can't handle so many transactions, so they can never really support the kind of activity communities need to have in order for this to really take off the way that Facebook takes off, or even the way the WeChat in China took off. Because with WeChat, you're able to actually pay people as well. And it's replaced cash in China. So we're looking to replicate that with community currencies. Each community should be able to essentially create its own currency. Like the city of Detroit could issue Detroit bucks, and then they could airdrop them around the country. And when people come to Detroit, they will use these Detroit bucks. So that's a way, just one application, a way to attract capital and people and tourism to the city. But if you're going from city to city, you also need conversion, currency conversion. So Intercoin is essentially the internet of coins. All of these local coins are exchangeable for one another in the Intercoin network. Intercoin is essentially the reserve currency that all these communities keep on reserve. So for example, if you are from Detroit and you're visiting the Berkshires, you're sitting at a restaurant, you can go ahead and pay with your Detroit bucks and it will be instantly converted into Berkshires. All the concepts about exit tax or discounts or local currency are stated up front. So all these coins are actually programmed with the rules right away. So if you're going to a community, you know what's going to happen with your coins. And the coins encourage the commerce to stay in the community, while Intercoin network enables cross-community payments. And sometimes you do have to pay a fee to the community in order to leave the community. Maybe you have to pay 5%. That's to encourage the community, people to spend local, hire local workers, pay local businesses, rather than use the Intercoin network to go and spend it somewhere out. But all of this is under the control of the community. They have their own coins. They have their own monetary policy. If they like, they can airdrop the coins to every homeless person and they can mitigate homelessness. They can airdrop the money to everybody and help end food insecurity. They can even measure how the coins are being spent around their economy and make decisions as a community, voting on how the coins are going to be issued. How many coins? Is it going to be for food? Is it going to be for clothing? All these decisions can be done on a community level. So you no longer have to trust elites with representative government. You can even have direct democracy by having the blockchain essentially continuously poll people. And when they're eligible, they say how much they want to issue for food, subsidized clothing, subsidized other things. These are just some examples of communities issuing their own currency, because what we have now is essentially just the federal currency. So if you have a city, and right now a lot of the cities in the north are hemorrhaging money, and they're hemorrhaging people, because not only is it cold and people are going to the south, but even capital, even Wall Street is looking to relocate somewhere in Miami, for example. A lot of it, because there's not as much congestion and the viruses are not as prevalent. So how are these cities going to attract people back? They need to supplement the federal currency with their own local coin. So that's what we do. We empower communities to issue their own currency, to run secure applications such as UBI, elections, and other things on their own blockchain. And then we operate the Intercoin network to allow them and their members to move from place to place. One last thing about Intercoin. Intercoin, the token, is designed so that the more communities join the network, the more demand there is for this token. But there is a fixed supply, just like with Bitcoin. So Intercoin is directly designed, essentially, to be a kind of investment vehicle. So you buy the Intercoin tokens and they increase in price. Now, the question is, why do they increase in price? And the answer is because more and more communities join the network and buy Intercoin to back their economies. Now, the local community currencies themselves are not investment vehicles. So one major thing that Intercoin does is separate the investment token from the currency token. And the thing is that the currency circulates within the city and hardly ever leaves the city. And so when somebody goes ahead and moves from Detroit and goes to the Berkshires, they don't ever necessarily hold Intercoins. They either hold Detroit bucks or Berkshires in their wallet. So regular people like you and I can go buy pizza and they can spend small amounts up to, say, $1,000 without having to worry about KYC or any of the sorts of things governments are worried about when they worry about capital controls and millions and billions of dollars being transferred on a network like this. Intercoin is not designed for everyday people to go ahead and move a lot of money from one place to another unless their community is okay with it. So when you deposit money into a community, the rules are stated up front and you know what it's like to withdraw money and what the limits are. And essentially the community is happy too that it's not going to suddenly lose all its capital overnight. On the other hand, Intercoin is designed for settlement between communities. So if a lot of people go from Detroit to the Berkshires and pay there, and at the same time, half as many people go from Berkshires to Detroit, right? Then at the end of the day, once in a while, the Intercoin network is used to settle up the differences that the Berkshires network has with the Detroit Bucks network. So Intercoin is essentially the internet of coins. And by buying Intercoins now, you essentially are taking a piece of the network, you can say, and also making a bet that the network will grow bigger in the future. If, on the other hand, you're buying Detroit bucks, you're probably doing it because you want to go to Detroit and spend it locally for food and other things. So in that way, Intercoin is essentially two layers. It's both the inter-network and powered by an asset that's designed to increase in price the more adoption this whole ecosystem gets. And at the same time, it also supports these side chains, these essentially community currencies that can all run their own monetary policy without affecting any other currency on the network. Finally, Intercoin also lets you have a gateway to fiat and a gateway to cryptocurrency. How? Because when Intercoin is traded on exchanges, those exchanges represent the opportunity to get out into fiat or crypto. In a sense, if you start your own currency on the Intercoin network, you won't have to list on an exchange because Detroit bucks can be obtained by simply buying Intercoin and then buying Detroit bucks with them. And if you happen to not want to ever hold Intercoin, you could directly just trade your fiat for Detroit bucks using those atomic swaps that Intercoin provides. So that's what Intercoin does. It enables any community to issue their own currency, understand how it circulates in its economy, democratically control its monetary policy, and it doesn't even need to get listed on an exchange because Intercoin already is a decentralized exchange. So all you have to do as a city, if you is basically work with Intercoin or another provider to set up the open source system that will power your community and your coins. And then everything else, including liquidity and including compliance with regulations, has already been addressed and thought out. And essentially, we started the company to take care of the technological, regulatory, and economic issues the communities would normally have to face in order to undertake a project like this. That's what Intercoin is.